Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. I'm a third-generation farmer running a modest 40-acre ranch just outside what used to be countryside but has slowly transformed into suburbia over the decades. My grandpa bought this place when there was nothing around for miles except other farms and open fields. Now we're surrounded by developments, including a particularly fancy subdivision that popped up about 5 years ago. We raise grass-fed cattle and grow organic produce. Nothing fancy, but it's honest work that's kept my family fed for generations. I live simply in the same farmhouse my grandparents built, which I've maintained and updated over the years. It's not much compared to the million-dollar mansions that now border my property, but it's home. I've always kept to myself, focused on my work, and stayed out of neighborhood politics. The agricultural community around here respects what I do, and I've never had trouble with any neighbors until recently. The contrast between my working farm and the manicured lawns of the subdivision next door is stark, but I figured live and let live, right? That all changed when I received certified mail one Tuesday afternoon last spring. I remember standing in my muddy boots by the mailbox, confused by the official-looking envelope. When I opened it, my confusion turned to complete disbelief. It was a notice claiming I owed $27,500 in unpaid HOA dues and fines to something called the Neighborhood Estates HOA. Even worse, it threatened foreclosure proceedings on my entire ranch if I didn't pay within 30 days. At first, I thought it was some kind of scam or they had the wrong address. My property predates any development around here by decades. I've never received any HOA notices before, never agreed to join any association, and certainly never received any warnings about fines or violations. The next morning, I called the number listed on the letter and reached the HOA president herself. I'll just refer to her as the president throughout this story. What happened next still makes my blood boil when I think about it. "Your farm ruins are aesthetic," she told me in the most condescending tone I've ever heard. "Your property was grandfathered into our HOA during the community expansion 3 years ago. You should have been paying dues since then." When I protested that I'd never agreed to any such arrangement, she laughed. "It doesn't matter what you agreed to. The vote already happened. Besides, that eyesore you call a farm is bringing down property values. We've got a developer interested in purchasing the whole area to expand our community, and frankly, it would be better for everyone if you just paid what you owe or let us handle the sale of your property." That's when I realized what was happening. This wasn't about dues or aesthetics. They wanted my land, and they were trying to steal it through bogus HOA claims. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting to straighten this out in person. I gathered all my property deeds, boundary surveys, and historical ownership documents. I even put on my least dirty pair of jeans and a button-up shirt, though I felt ridiculous getting dressed up to prove I owned my own property. The meeting was held at the neighborhood clubhouse, all fancy with granite countertops and expensive furniture. The moment I walked in, I could feel eyes on me. I stuck out like a sore thumb among the business casual crowd with their designer clothes and perfect hairstyles. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the front table where the HOA board sat looking down at me. I explained my situation calmly and presented my documentation showing clear property boundaries and proving my land was separate from their development. "With all due respect," I said, spreading out my county-certified property maps, "my family has owned this land since 1950, long before your development existed. I've never signed any agreement to join your HOA, and legally you can't force me to become a member." The president barely glanced at my documents. "We had a community expansion vote 3 years ago. The board approved incorporating adjacent properties into our jurisdiction to maintain neighborhood standards." She slid a document across the table showing a map with altered boundary lines that somehow included my property within their development. Something looked off about it immediately. The boundaries didn't match county records, and the document lacked official stamps and seals. When I pointed this out, one of the board members, an older man in an expensive suit, cut me off. "We don't need your permission. The vote has been registered with the county. You can pay the dues and clean up your property, or we'll be forced to proceed with foreclosure." Several homeowners in attendance looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. The board voted unanimously to continue with foreclosure proceedings unless I paid the full amount plus additional penalties for being confrontational. I left that meeting shaking with anger but determined to fight. This was my family's legacy they were trying to steal, and I wasn't about to let that happen without a fight. The next few weeks were a nightmare. True to their word, the HOA filed foreclosure paperwork with the county. I suddenly found myself needing to hire an attorney, something I'd never had to do before. Farming doesn't exactly make you rich, and good legal representation isn't cheap, but I had some savings and this was worth fighting for. I found a real estate attorney who specialized in property disputes. After reviewing my case, he was confident we could fight this, but warned me it wouldn't be easy or quick. What we discovered next, though, changed everything. My attorney did some digging and found that the documents the HOA had presented as proof of their jurisdiction had been altered. The original county zoning maps clearly showed my property was agricultural land, completely separate from residential zoning. Someone had digitally modified these documents to make it appear my property fell within their boundaries. Even more disturbing, my attorney discovered this wasn't the first time this particular HOA had tried similar tactics. They'd attempted to force out 2 other property owners at the edge of their development, though those properties were much smaller than mine. While the legal investigation was ongoing, things got worse on the ground. HOA members began showing up at my property line, taking photos of my equipment, animals, and buildings. They called animal control claiming my cattle were being mistreated, which prompted an inspection that found nothing wrong with my operation. They filed complaints about farm smells and machinery noise with the county, despite the fact that agricultural operations are protected by right-to-farm laws in our state. The harassment reached a peak when the president and 3 board members actually came onto my property one Sunday afternoon with cameras, claiming they were documenting violations. I was working in the barn when my dog started barking. I came out to find them wandering around my equipment yard, taking close-up photos of a tractor I was in the middle of repairing. "You're trespassing," I told them. "This is private property, and you need to leave immediately." The president actually rolled her eyes at me. "This property is subject to our covenants, and we have every right to inspect it. This junkyard you're running is a clear violation." My patience was gone. "Get off my land now, or I'm calling the sheriff." They left, but not before the president told me they'd be adding trespassing charges to their complaint. It was completely backward, but showed how entitled they felt. After that incident, I installed security cameras around my property. It was an expense I hadn't planned for, but it turned out to be one of the best investments I made. Over the next month, those cameras captured multiple instances of HOA members coming onto my property, moving boundary markers, and in one case, even opening a gate to my cattle pasture. If they were trying to get my animals loose on the road, they failed, but the attempt was caught clearly on video. All this evidence went straight to my attorney, who added it to our growing countersuit. We weren't just defending against their foreclosure anymore. We were going on the offensive, suing the HOA and its board members personally for fraud, harassment, and conspiracy. The turning point came when my attorney found 2 other landowners who had faced similar tactics from this HOA. One had actually sold their property under pressure, believing they had no choice. The other was still fighting a smaller battle over HOA fines. Both were willing to testify about their experiences. We presented our evidence at a county board meeting, including the altered documents, harassment footage, and testimony from the other affected landowners. The county officials were shocked by what they saw. The planning commissioner immediately flagged the foreclosure proceedings for review and opened an investigation into document fraud. A local reporter happened to be at that meeting covering an unrelated story, but my case caught their attention. Within days, there was a feature in the local paper about how a historic family farm was fighting against improper expansion by a neighborhood association. Public opinion quickly sided with me, with many people sharing similar stories online about HOA overreach. The pressure began to mount on the HOA. Some residents, after learning what their board was doing, started attending meetings to question these tactics. The developer who had been interested in buying my land suddenly got very quiet, not wanting to be associated with the growing scandal. When we finally got our day in court, it was almost anticlimactic how quickly the judge saw through the HOA claims. The evidence of document tampering was clear, and their attempts to incorporate agricultural land into a residential HOA violated multiple county zoning regulations. The judge not only dismissed the foreclosure action but also granted a permanent injunction preventing the HOA from claiming jurisdiction over my property. He was particularly disturbed by the pattern of harassment and the evidence of document fraud. "This appears to be a coordinated attempt to improperly seize property through fraudulent means," the judge stated. "The court takes a very dim view of such actions." The real hammer fell when the judge awarded me damages. The HOA itself was ordered to pay my legal fees plus $150,000 in punitive damages. More significantly, the judge found that the president and 2 other board members had personal liability for the fraud since they had knowingly pursued it outside their official capacity. The county prosecutor's office opened a criminal investigation based on the evidence of document tampering, which is a felony in our state. The president and the board treasurer eventually faced criminal charges for falsifying official records. The aftermath was satisfying in ways I never anticipated. The developer completely backed out of any expansion plans. Several HOA residents came by my farm to personally apologize, admitting they had no idea what their board had been doing in their name. One older couple even brought me a homemade pie and asked for a tour of the farm, genuinely interested in what I did. I used part of the settlement money to improve my farm's security and fencing. But I also set aside a portion to establish a legal defense fund for other small landowners facing similar situations. My attorney agreed to provide reduced fee consultations for anyone being pressured by overzealous HOA. The criminal case against the HOA leadership concluded with plea agreements. The president and treasurer both received probation and community service, plus financial penalties. The real estate consequences were more severe for them. With felony fraud charges on their records, they couldn't continue in their real estate jobs. The president, who I learned was also a real estate agent working with the developer, lost her license. Both the president and treasurer ended up selling their homes, unable to face their neighbors after everything came to light. In a twist that still makes me smile, the president's house went into foreclosure when she couldn't sell it fast enough. When it came up for auction, I put in a bid and ended up buying it for less than half its market value. I had no interest in living in a fancy house in that neighborhood, but I did have several loyal farm employees who needed affordable housing. I renovated the house into 2 comfortable apartments and now rent them at below market rates to my farm manager and his family. The HOA tried to object to this, claiming it violated their single-family residence rules, but my attorney quickly reminded them that as the legal owner, I was entitled to reasonable use of the property within county zoning laws, which allowed for accessory dwelling units. The final touch came when I installed a small, tasteful sign at the boundary between my farm and the subdivision. It simply reads Family Farm Est. 1950. Not part of any HOA, it's small enough to comply with county signage rules but visible enough to serve as a reminder of what happens when people try to bully their neighbors. Today, things are peaceful again. My farm continues to operate as it has for decades. The subdivision has a new HOA board that seems focused on actually serving their community rather than expanding their power. Some of the residents have even become customers at my weekend farm stand, bringing their kids to see the animals and learn where food comes from. This whole experience taught me that sometimes you have to stand up and fight, even when the odds seem stacked against you. My grandparents bought this land with the dream that it would support our family for generations. Thanks to a good attorney, some luck, and a lot of determination, I made sure their dream stays alive. I never wanted to be in a battle with my neighbors, but when pushed, I discovered I had more fight in me than I knew. Now my family's legacy is secure, protected not just by legal documents, but by a community that's learned to respect property rights and the limits of their authority. And every morning when I look out over my fields, I feel a deep satisfaction knowing this land will stay in my family for another generation, HOA free. The next one is entitled People Story. I'm writing this because of a recent situation that led to my dad being suspended from duties in the church where he resided for over 10 years. And Dad told us, I have 2 younger brothers, during a family meeting last week. We didn't go to church this Sunday because of what happened too. My parents are leaders in our church, and leaders often do the post-worship announcements about church programs/upcoming events before the tithe baskets are passed and the pastor speaks. Our church is pretty big with 2 services, and the incident happened when Dad did the announcements last week. Announcements usually follow a pattern of briefing the congregation on events before asking all first-time visitors to stand and receive a brochure while being welcomed by the congregation. If there is anyone visibly wearing a military uniform, or someone having alerted the church to the fact that their military relative was home for the week, they ask that person to stand, which usually results in a standing ovation. We didn't have anyone from the military last week, but my dad asked if any federal workers were present to have them stand before saying that God's in control and will never leave them no matter how bleak things seem, and he also thanked them for their service to our country. When Dad explained his motivation at our family meeting, he said he felt God put it on his heart to honor federal workers the same way our church honored medical workers during COVID, once services resumed, by having nurses stand for recognition. He also said he felt led to reassure them that they were appreciated amidst everything going on in the federal government. However, Dad was talked to by one of the assistant pastors during the week and was told that he shouldn't have done that. My dad disagrees because the main pastor often talks about letting the Lord dictate the service regardless of pre-made plans, and other leaders have followed that creed. For example, there are days when worship is really powerful, and the pastor will have the band sing a few more songs than originally planned or have an impromptu altar call for something God puts on his heart. There are times when someone gives a prophetic word in tongues, a different language, that are also impromptu, and a leader/pastor will often elaborate on it afterward. Going back to Dad, he said he's been considering leaving the church for some time and that now was perhaps God's timing. He also said the church has gotten too political in recent years, and he said that played a part in what happened. The assistant pastor who informed him of the suspension told him that federal workers shouldn't be honored like nurses or veterans because, unlike them, they can't do their jobs at home via telework and be lazy. He even said that honoring them was disrespectful to veterans/nurses, and my dad disagrees. Dad said he felt led to honor federal workers because many of them were being wrongfully villainized, but he was suspended from announcements for a few weeks. He also thinks the time is right to leave the church, but he wanted to talk to us because of the friends we had there, more so my younger brothers. He thinks they should be able to keep their friends similar to kids who have friends from other schools. Personally, I respect him for being open with us, and Mom agrees that the suspension was uncalled for. Dad is mostly stressed about being a deacon and wanting to step down before his term ends. He also said he's nervous about who to tell beforehand or not, and Mom said that they will work on it. He doesn't want to burn his bridges, but he doesn't know how to go about it. I know I don't have much of anything to contribute to how he steps down aside from supporting him, but I wanted to ask if anyone had any experience with stepping down or any ideas I could suggest. I would appreciate any that are given. Update: I really appreciate all of the perspectives given on my first post, and I shared some of them with my parents, including one in particular I'll highlight. My dad took a few days to pray over what he should do, and he learned something from one commenter who gave insight into something he didn't see. The comment, from aggravating_Kale9788, said it could be dangerous for a federal employee to stand up and be identified in that manner as OSPEC, operational security, is taught to federal workers and especially in this current political climate. The comment also suggested the possibility of a crazy person potentially following them into the parking lot or home. Dad said he didn't consider that and thought it was perhaps a reason why he was suspended, although the assistant pastor never mentioned it. He eventually decided on meeting with the senior pastor to discuss the suspension, and we had another family meeting to discuss it shortly afterwards. During the meeting, Dad reiterated much of what the assistant pastor said and how he disagreed with him, saying that federal workers shouldn't be mentioned in the same breath as nurses/veterans because they can't telework and be lazy. But Dad also mentioned his mistake of potentially pressuring federal workers to stand, which could have put them in a very dangerous position, and asked if that had anything to do with the suspension. But the pastor told him that it had nothing to do with the suspension and that he signed off on it before the assistant pastor told him. Long story short, he basically reiterated what the youth pastor said about how it's insulting to honor federal workers in the same breath as nurses/veterans. But when Dad pointed out, what another comment informed us, how many federal workers were veterans and nurses and firefighters whom our church also honors from time to time, the pastor didn't change his tune. Dad explained how he felt God told him to honor federal workers who were being unfairly villainized, but he didn't see it that way. After Dad told us how it went, Mom said they made the decision to stop attending immediately because she believed that their handling of this was disrespectful. Dad's been in the church for over 10 years, currently serves as a deacon and was once a trustee too. It is also hypocritical how other leaders are allowed to follow the Holy Spirit if God puts something on their heart, such as impromptu altar calls, or going off on a tangent about something random God wants someone in the congregation to hear. Usually a very spot-on assessment, like someone proclaiming that a nurse in the congregation has a big life decision they're stressed about or something. I told a few commenters that the same senior pastor used to have a thing about not talking politics, and would say that we are to pray for whoever is in office because God can use anyone for his glory. But ever since the current president began running for re-election, he slowly changed his tune and began promoting him during service, one of the many reasons Dad felt led to leave for a while. The senior pastor has served in our church for over 30 years, and his recent change has hurt Mom and Dad to see. At the end of the meeting, Dad said that we'd take time off from attending church until they decided on some new ones to try. So that's pretty much it. But I wanted to address another thing that people mentioned regarding our church. I mentioned that our church often honors many people, and some said that that was off-putting. I mentioned this to Dad, and he actually agreed that some of it seemed contrived. If a couple has a milestone wedding anniversary coming up, they'll often tell the church, during the week, and ask to be recognized during service. So a leader will have them stand the same way they ask veterans if we see one in a uniform, or their family tells the church that their military relative will be there that Sunday, and the wedding anniversary requests personally sound a bit awkward/attention-seeking. Regarding veterans, the church once received a complaint from a veteran who didn't wear a uniform to church, but was blindsided when their family called the church, during the week, to ask him to stand by name to be recognized, and he said that he wouldn't attend anymore as a result because he just wanted to attend in peace. The church does the same for nurses and milestone birthdays, but they didn't stop following that complaint. As a matter of fact, the church continued with the tradition because the senior pastor said that the standing ovations for the veterans often brings up the energy in the service, and he compared it to how SeaWorld opened their One Ocean show with a tribute to veterans, asking them to stand at the beginning. Dad disagreed and said God doesn't need artificial things to bring up the energy in the service, but the traditions continued nonetheless. That's just one of many things with this church, and Dad thinks now is the right time to leave. I appreciate the perspectives that were given as it really helped us reflect on everything that happened. The next one is entitled People's Story. I'll try to keep this short because I'm so stunned I think I've stopped being able to process things. I've 26M been with my fiancée 25F for 4 years. We've been engaged since last year and actively planning the wedding. Last month, we moved to a new city across the country because my fiancé got an amazing job offer. I wasn't happy about it since I had to quit my job and all our family and friends were in the city we left. I was kind of a jerk during the moving process, but I've come around since getting here. My fiancé kept talking about this guy late 20s maybe, she worked with at her new job, and it made me uneasy. I went to a few after-work events where he showed up, and he seemed like a total a-hole. Very full of himself artistic type. I didn't like the way he interacted with my fiancé and we would occasionally fight about it. Tuesday night she got home really late, sat me down and broke up with me. She said she felt an immediate bond with this coworker that's stronger than anything she's ever felt before. This from the woman who just a few months ago I held in my arms while watching the stars as she told me she's never felt more at peace than when she's beside me. I laid awake on the couch all night feeling like I was continually being punched in the stomach. I didn't fall asleep until 3 p.m. yesterday, and stayed asleep until this morning when she woke me up. Basically, she's having this a hole over for Valentine's Day and demanded she get the apartment to herself. Between the move, all the deposits we had been putting for wedding stuff, and not having a job since we moved out here, I have literally no money for a hotel or anything else. We got into a big fight because I called her out and said she knew I had nowhere else to go. She said that's not her problem. She's done solving my problems for me. What? And that I needed to fix this one on my own. I guess his roommate is having a date over, so my fiancé offered our place for her date with the a-hole. She says this is happening no matter what I say. So yeah, what the hell am I supposed to do? Update: I've 27/M spent the last year working very hard to improve myself. Now that it's Valentine's Day again, I was thinking about what a dark place I was in last year. I didn't have the strength to post an update back then, but now that I've had some time to heal, I wanted to let everyone know how I'm doing. Thank you all to everyone who helped. You were the only support I had last year, and it meant the world. It looks like my original post was deleted. I can still see the text when I log in, so here is the old TL. Doctor. After uprooting me from my hometown a month ago, my fiancé dumped me on Tuesday, and is now demanding the apartment to herself tomorrow for a date with this a-hole artist from her new job. I have no money to do anything else. Part of the reason I didn't update afterward was because I was extremely embarrassed with how things turned out. It's only because of some intense therapy that I'm able to be honest and okay with telling the story. Basically, I decided to make one last big attempt at winning her 26/F back. Right after we got engaged, my ex had a close relative succumb to a long-time illness. This relative was very happy that she lived long enough to see us get engaged. When my ex was a child, this relative had given my ex a charm that she wore all the time. A few months after the relative died, my ex lost the charm, and it was like the relative died a second time. As we packed up the apartment to move to the new city, I found the charm. Rather than give it back immediately, I decided that I would keep it in a safe place and surprise my ex with it at our wedding. I thought it would be a meaningful way to include this relative in a moment where she would be deeply missed. Somehow, I got in my head that if I showed her the charm on Valentine's Day, she'd remember everything that we shared and that I could cut through whatever fog she was caught up in. I was under the impression that my ex would come home after work by herself to get the place ready for our date. I was planning to use this alone time to give her the charm and either win her back, or lose decisively and leave before her date showed up. But instead, she showed up with the a-hole from her job. That threw me through a loop big time, and it was incredibly awkward. He was patronizing. She became livid that I stole her charm. I struggled to articulate myself. It was the most embarrassed I've ever been. I got out of there and literally walked around all night until it got so cold I couldn't stand it anymore. I went back to the apartment building around 4 a.m., and in what was a personal low point, fell asleep in the hallway outside our apartment. But that was the low point. There have been high points since then. I was able to move back to my hometown, and my old employer gave me my old job back. I even met someone else and we dated for a while. We just broke up though. It sucks to be alone again on Valentine's Day, but I've learned it's okay to be sad every once in a while. And compared to last year, this year is practically a celebration. Therapy gave me a wonder perspective on life and some great coping skills for when times get difficult. As for my ex, I heard she married the a-hole guy from work. Her sister would text me occasionally, and apparently her family hates the guy. Whatever, it's not my problem anymore. Lastly, I want to thank everyone on Reddit, sincerely. People offered to buy me a ticket home. Other people offered to hang out with me if we happened to be in the same city. Some people even offered just to Skype with me so I could have someone to talk with. Even though I didn't respond, your messages meant so much to me. Thank you. The next one is entitled People Story. My girlfriend and I have been dating for about 11 months now and things have been pretty good between us. We have had a few ups and downs, but nothing serious. She and I both love the game Dungeons and Dragons, and so I had invited her to join the group I run games for. It is, or rather was, a nice way for us to bond. Shortly after inviting her to join in on my games, some stuff happened with her grandparents and her family was going to move out of town to a location that is about 3 to 4 hours away. Neither of us wanted to do a long-distance relationship. I had a bad experience with one anyways, so I let her move in with me. Since I am a student and my income would not support the both of us, she got a job on the campus I go to. Well, shortly after she started working, I had noticed her attitude and behavior changed drastically. At first, when things did not go her way in the game, she would joke, "I'll have you sleep on the couch," which was said in a joking manner, so everyone found it kinda funny. She never would force me to sleep on the couch, so I did not mind it. A few months later, she became easier to upset during the games and would argue specific decisions I made for the sake of the game. Most of the time, they were small and did not really affect the game or anyone's fun. Other times her arguing would completely halt the game, as I would have to stop and read the rules out to her saying exactly why something was decided that way. During this time she continued to say stuff similar to "I'll have you sleep on the couch," but in a more serious and angry tone. Granted, she never followed through with making me sleep on the couch. But anyways, this all leads up to last night where I was running a session and she became upset over the number of monsters the party had fought that night. After an encounter with a bunch of really weak monsters, the party ran into some wild barbarians who attacked the party. This is when she threatened to make me sleep on the couch if I did not wrap up the encounter fast. I decided to ignore her threat for the time, since I did not want to argue and just wanted to wrap things up for the night. The other party members, most in their 20s, both guys, girls, and my sister, appeared to be really uncomfortable with her suddenly getting so upset about an encounter that the party could definitely handle. Through the encounter, things went well for the group. My girlfriend halfway through the encounter completely shut down after she missed an attack. This in particular upset one of the players, 20F, and that player was visibly trying not to burst in anger. After the session, the player wanted to speak to me alone and told me that my girlfriend's behavior is making the game not fun for her, but also for pretty much the entire party. She feels that my girlfriend is emotionally abusing me to get what she wants in-game. She also informed me that one of the players, 17F, explicitly did not want to come because of how my girlfriend had been acting. I told the player that I would talk to my girlfriend about her behavior that night. I did end up having a conversation with my girlfriend about it. She expressed she does not know why she gets so angry. Quick note: I have observed her behavior when I am not the one running the session, and she does not at all act the same when someone else is running the session. This is where I need advice. She is a wonderful girlfriend and I care about her so much. I never got the feeling that she may be abusive. I do not know if I should kick her from my game, which I feel would just make everything worse. I am just a loss for what I should do. What I should do next, I just do not know. Update: this update is being written the morning after a pretty great session with the group I am running for. I spoke to her about her behavior and we have worked it out. I did tell her that I really do not want that sort of behavior in my games and she understood. The next few days she kinda moped around because she thought the rest of the party would hate her, but after she talked to them on Discord, she felt better. She told me that she would try to take the games less seriously. The next session we had, which was last night, I made it clear to the whole party about new ground rules I wanted to set. Mostly so that nothing like what happened in the previous post would happen again, but also to make sure everyone knew I was no longer going to tolerate that behavior. The party as a whole seemed on board with it and we got started playing. My girlfriend had some actual fun and the rest of the party also had some good laughs. It personally felt really good to see everything running so smoothly. My girlfriend after the session asked me how she was and I told her that she was fine and that her attitude in the game was great. It seems to me that she will be trying her best to do better. She did seem interested in possibly talking to a therapist about how stressed she has been feeling. I told her that I would support her either way and if she really wanted to go see one then we would figure something out for her to go. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.